The morning sun cast long shadows across the rocky hills of northern Afghanistan. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos adjusted her scope for the third time in 10 minutes, though she knew it was already perfectly calibrated. Old habits died hard, especially when you were the only woman on a 4-person sniper team. "Santos, quit fiddling with your gear," called out Sergeant First Class Jake Morrison from behind his own rifle. "We've been over this a dozen times." Maria didn't look back. "Just making sure everything's perfect, Morrison." "Everything's always perfect with you," chimed in Corporal Danny Rodriguez, the team's spotter. "That's why they call you Robot." The nickname had stuck since basic training. While other soldiers complained about the heat, the cold, or the food, Maria just got the job done. No drama, no excuses, just results. Some saw it as a compliment. Others, like Morrison, seemed to think it meant she was trying too hard to prove something. Their team leader, Master Sergeant Tom Bradley, studied the valley below through his binoculars. At 42, Bradley had more combat experience than the rest of them combined. He was fair, respected, and had never once mentioned Maria's gender as an issue. That meant more to her than any medal. "All right, listen up," Bradley said, lowering his binoculars. "Intelligence confirms our target is moving through the valley at 800. High-value target, codename Serpent. This guy's been coordinating attacks on our supply convoys for months." Maria checked her watch. 0730 hours, 30 minutes to get into position. "The shot's going to be from that ridge," Bradley pointed to an outcropping about 800 meters away. "Clean line of sight to the valley floor. Rodriguez will spot. Santos takes the shot. Morrison and I will provide security." Morrison's jaw tightened. "Sergeant, with respect, that's a long shot. Wouldn't it make more sense for someone with more field experience to take it?" Maria felt her stomach clench. Here it came again. Always the same doubt, always the same questions about her ability. Bradley's expression didn't change. "Santos has the best accuracy scores in the battalion. She's earned this shot." "Range is one thing," Morrison continued. "Combat conditions are another. Wind down there is unpredictable. We get one chance at this guy, and if we miss—" "We won't miss," Maria interrupted quietly. "I won't miss." Morrison turned to face her fully. "Look, Santos, I'm not saying you can't shoot. But this isn't the range back at Bragg. This is the real deal. Lives depend on this." "Lives always depend on this," Maria replied, her voice steady. "That's why I practice every day. That's why I study the ballistics charts until I know them by heart. That's why I check my gear 3 times instead of once." Rodriguez looked between them nervously. At 19, he was the youngest on the team and hated conflict. "Maybe we should just focus on the mission?" Bradley nodded. "Rodriguez is right. We have a job to do. Santos, you've trained for this. Morrison, you'll understand why she's here once you see her work." They gathered their gear and began the trek to the shooting position. The terrain was rough, with loose rock that threatened to send stones tumbling down the hillside with every step. Maria moved carefully. Her rifle secured across her back, her eyes constantly scanning for the best path forward. The morning air was crisp, but warming quickly. By midday, the heat would create mirages that could throw off even the most experienced shooter. They needed to be in position soon. As they climbed, Rodriguez fell into step beside Maria. "Don't let Morrison get to you," he whispered. "He's just nervous because this is his first deployment as senior enlisted." Maria appreciated the support, but she'd dealt with doubt before. In sniper school, instructors had pushed her harder than anyone else, not because they wanted her to fail, but because they knew she'd face questions in the field. Every shot had to be perfect. Every decision had to be flawless. There was no room for error when people already expected you to fail. 20 minutes later, they reached the ridge. Bradley immediately began setting up a perimeter while Morrison positioned himself to watch their 6. Maria and Rodriguez found the perfect spot, a natural depression in the rock that provided cover and a clear view of the valley below. Maria set up her rifle, a customized M24 that she'd been working with for 2 years. Every adjustment, every modification had been made to match her shooting style. The weight distribution, the trigger pull, even the cheek rest height. Everything was perfectly suited to her. Rodriguez positioned himself beside her with his spotting scope. "Range to the road is 847 meters, he reported quietly. "Wind from the southwest at about 5 miles per hour. Maria calculated quickly in her head. At that distance, with that wind, she'd need to adjust her aim point about 2 inches left and 3 inches high. Not impossible, but not easy either. "Movement in the valley," Bradley called softly from his position. Maria peered through her scope. 3 vehicles were making their way along the dirt road, 2 pickup trucks and a sedan, traveling in convoy formation, standard procedure for high-value targets in the area. "Target should be in the middle vehicle," Rodriguez confirmed, studying the convoy through his scope. Maria tracked the vehicles as they moved closer to the optimal shooting position. Her heart rate slowed, her breathing became controlled and measured. This was what all the training had been for. The convoy stopped. "Why are they stopping?" Morrison's voice carried a note of tension. Through her scope, Maria could see figures getting out of the vehicles. They seemed to be examining something on the road. "Looks like they're checking for IEDs, she reported. Bradley cursed under his breath. "If they turn around, we lose our chance." The figures moved around the vehicles for several minutes. Maria kept her crosshairs centered on the middle sedan, waiting for her target to show himself. Her finger rested lightly on the trigger guard, ready but not touching the trigger itself. Safety protocol was second nature. "There," Rodriguez said suddenly, getting out of the passenger side of the sedan. Maria adjusted her scope slightly and saw him, the man intelligence had identified as Serpent. Medium height, dark beard, wearing local clothing but moving with military precision. He was talking to someone near the lead vehicle, gesturing toward the hills. "He's looking this way," Morrison observed tensely. "He can't see us from this distance," Bradley replied, but his voice carried concern. Maria studied the target through her scope. The man was about 30 years old, she estimated, fit, alert, dangerous. He'd been responsible for the deaths of at least a dozen American soldiers and countless Afghan civilians. This wasn't personal for her, but it was important. The target moved to the rear of the convoy, disappearing behind the vehicles. "Lost visual," Maria reported. They waited. Minutes ticked by with no sign of their target reappearing. The rest of the convoy members continued checking the road, but Serpent remained hidden behind the vehicles. "Maybe he got back in," Rodriguez suggested hopefully. "Negative," Maria said, keeping her eye to the scope. "I can see shadows under the vehicles. Someone's moving around back there." Morrison shifted restlessly behind them. "How long do we wait? They could decide to turn around at any time." "We wait until we have the shot," Bradley answered firmly. "This might be our only chance at this guy." More time passed. The sun continued climbing, and heat waves were beginning to rise from the valley floor. Soon, the thermal distortion would make any long-range shot nearly impossible. "There," Maria said suddenly. "He's moving to the front of the convoy again." Through her scope, she could see Serpent walking toward the lead vehicle. He was talking to the driver, pointing back the way they had come. It looked like he was giving orders to turn around. "Now or never," Bradley said quietly. Maria centered her crosshairs on the target's torso. At this range, a center-mass shot would be the most reliable. The man was partially obscured by one of the pickup trucks, but she had a clear view of his upper body. She took a deep breath, let half of it out, and began to squeeze the trigger. "Wait!" Morrison called out suddenly. "The wind's picking up. Look at the dust being kicked up down there." Maria paused, her finger still on the trigger. Through her scope, she could see that Morrison was right. The wind in the valley was increasing, swirling dust around the vehicles. "Wind speed?" she asked Rodriguez. Rodriguez studied his instruments. "Variable, 5 to 12 miles per hour, shifting direction." "That's too much uncertainty," Morrison said. "In these conditions with that range, the shot's not feasible. We should wait for them to get closer." Maria kept her eye on the scope. The target was still giving instructions, but he was beginning to move back toward his vehicle. If they waited much longer, he'd be gone. "They're not getting closer," she said quietly. "This is the shot we have." "Santos, be realistic," Morrison pressed. "Variable wind at 847 meters? That's a prayer, not a shot. We need to be smart about this." Bradley was quiet, letting his team work through the tactical situation. Maria knew he'd back whatever decision she made, but he wouldn't make it for her. Through her scope, she watched Serpent take one more look toward the hills. For a brief moment, it seemed like he was looking directly at her. Then he turned and began walking toward his vehicle. "He's leaving," Rodriguez reported urgently. Maria calculated quickly. The wind was unpredictable, but it wasn't impossible. She'd made shots in worse conditions during training. The key was timing, finding the moment when the wind settled, even for just a few seconds. "I can make this shot," she said firmly. "Santos," Morrison started. "I can make this shot," she repeated, cutting him off. "I need everyone to trust me." She watched the dust patterns in the valley, studying how the wind moved across the terrain. There was a rhythm to it, periods of stronger gusts, followed by brief calms. She just needed to time it right. Serpent was almost to his vehicle. In 10 seconds, maybe 15, he'd be inside and driving away. Maria steadied herself, controlling her breathing, her heart rate, her muscle tension. Everything else faded away. Morrison's doubts, Rodriguez's nervous energy, even the pressure of the mission itself. There was only her, the rifle, and the target. She watched the dust settle for just a moment in the valley below. Her finger completed its squeeze on the trigger. The rifle fired with a sharp crack that echoed off the surrounding hills. Through her scope, Maria tracked the bullet's path toward the target, watching for any indication of hit or miss. For what seemed like an eternity, everything was still. Then she saw him fall. The target dropped immediately, his body crumpling beside the sedan. The other figures around the convoy scattered, some diving for cover, others raising weapons to scan the hills. "Target down," Maria reported quietly, already beginning to pack her gear. Rodriguez stared through his spotting scope in amazement. Clean hit. "Center mass." Morrison was silent behind them. "Outstanding shot," Bradley said, his voice carrying genuine respect. "Time to move. They'll be looking for us now." As they prepared to leave their position, Maria caught Morrison looking at her with a different expression than before. The doubt was still there, but it was mixed with something else now. Surprise, maybe, or the beginning of respect. "Good shooting," he said quietly as they gathered their equipment. "Just doing my job," Maria replied, but she appreciated the acknowledgement. They began their tactical withdrawal, moving carefully back down the ridge toward their extraction point. In the distance, they could hear vehicles starting up as the remaining convoy members prepared to evacuate their fallen leader. Rodriguez fell into step beside Maria again as they descended. "How did you know you could make that shot?" Maria considered the question as she navigated around a loose boulder. "I didn't know for certain," she admitted, "but I knew I'd trained for it. I knew my equipment, and I knew the cost of missing was higher than the cost of trying." "The other guys are going to hear about this," Rodriguez said with a grin. "Robot Santos makes the impossible shot." "It wasn't impossible," Maria corrected him. "It was just difficult." Behind them, Morrison remained quiet, but she could sense him processing what had happened. One successful shot wouldn't eliminate all doubts, but it was a start. In this business, respect was earned one trigger pull at a time. As they reached the bottom of the ridge, Bradley spoke into his radio, reporting mission success to their command element. The target was neutralized, and they were moving to extraction. Maria checked her weapon as they walked, ensuring it was safe and properly secured. The morning's work was done, but there would be other missions, other targets, other opportunities to prove herself. That was the reality of being a woman in special operations. Every day was another chance to demonstrate that she belonged. The sun was fully up now, promising another scorching day in the Afghan mountains. But for Maria Santos, it was shaping up to be a pretty good day after all. They had work to do, and she was exactly where she belonged. 3 weeks had passed since the mission in the valley, and the dynamics within Bradley's sniper team had shifted noticeably. Morrison still questioned tactics and procedures. That was his nature. But he no longer questioned Maria's ability to execute them. The successful elimination of Serpent had earned her something more valuable than any commendation: the grudging respect of her peers. The team was currently stationed at Forward Operating Base Chapman, a dusty collection of concrete barriers and prefabricated buildings nestled in the mountains near the Pakistani border. It wasn't glamorous, but it was strategically positioned to interdict high-value targets moving through the region. Maria sat in the team's makeshift office, cleaning her rifle for the second time that day. The routine was meditative, each component disassembled, inspected, cleaned, and reassembled with practiced precision. Rodriguez watched from across the room, still amazed by her methodical approach to equipment maintenance. "You know that thing's already cleaner than a hospital operating room," he said, not looking up from his own gear. "Clean rifles save lives," Maria replied, running a bore snake through the barrel one more time. "Besides, we've got that briefing in an hour. I want everything ready." Bradley entered the room carrying a folder marked with red security tape. His expression was serious, which usually meant they were about to receive a mission that would test their abilities. "Where's Morrison?" Bradley asked, looking around the room. "Getting coffee," Rodriguez answered. "Should be back any minute." As if summoned, Morrison appeared in the doorway carrying 2 cups of the base's notoriously strong coffee. He offered one to Bradley, who accepted it gratefully. "All right, gather around," Bradley said, opening the folder. "We've got a new target, and this one's going to be challenging." The team assembled around Bradley's desk as he spread out aerial photographs and intelligence reports. Maria recognized the terrain immediately: a series of steep valleys and ridges about 40 kilometers to the northeast. "Target is a bomb maker, codename Professor," Bradley began. "This guy's been teaching others how to build the new IEDs that have been causing so much trouble for our patrols. Intelligence indicates he's been moving between safe houses, but they've identified a location where he'll be tomorrow." Morrison studied the photographs intently. "This terrain looks brutal. What kind of ranges are we talking about?" Bradley pointed to a ridge line on the aerial photo. "Best shooting position is here, on this ridge. Range to the target building is approximately 1,200 meters. Rodriguez whistled low. "That's past effective range for most rifle systems." "Not for ours," Maria said, studying the photos more carefully. 1,200 meters is challenging, but manageable with the right conditions. "Here's the problem," Bradley continued. "The target building is in a compound surrounded by civilians, women, children, elderly people. The professor uses them as human shields, knowing we won't risk collateral damage." Maria understood immediately. This wasn't just about making a long shot. It was about making a precise shot in conditions where missing could kill innocent people. "What's the window of opportunity?" she asked. "Intelligence says the professor meets with his students every day at 1,400 hours on the roof of the building. It's the only time he's separated from the civilian population." Morrison frowned as he studied the aerial photos. Roof shots are tricky. Wind effects are amplified at that range, and there's no cover if things go wrong. "There's another issue," Bradley added. The compound is only accessible from one direction, and it's heavily watched. We'll have to insert at night and be in position before dawn. That means at least 8 hours in a hide site before the shot opportunity. Maria calculated the logistics in her head. 8 hours of remaining completely motionless, maintaining focus, dealing with weather conditions, and then making a precision shot at extreme range with civilians at risk. It was the kind of challenge that separated elite snipers from merely good ones. "What's the backup plan if the shot isn't feasible?" Morrison asked. "There isn't one," Bradley replied bluntly. "This is our only intelligence on the professor's location. If we miss this opportunity, he disappears back into the mountains and more of our people die from his bombs." The room fell silent as each team member processed the implications. This wasn't just another high-value target elimination. This was a mission where success or failure would have immediate consequences for American forces throughout the region. Rodriguez broke the silence. "When do we leave?" "We insert at 2200 hours tonight," Bradley answered. "That gives us 6 hours to prepare and conduct final mission planning." As the team began discussing equipment requirements and insertion routes, Maria's mind was already working through the ballistics calculations. 1,200 meters in mountain terrain meant dealing with altitude effects, temperature variations, and unpredictable wind patterns. The shot would require perfect timing and flawless execution. After the briefing concluded, Morrison approached Maria as she packed her gear. "You comfortable with this range?" he asked. The question was direct but not challenging. Over the past 3 weeks, Morrison had learned to trust Maria's assessment of her own capabilities. "I've made shots at that distance before," she replied honestly. "But not with civilians in the area. That changes everything." Morrison nodded. "Missing high or left puts rounds into the compound. That's unacceptable." "I won't miss," Maria said simply. "I know you won't," Morrison replied. And for the first time, his confidence seemed genuine rather than forced. "I just want to make sure you know what we're all counting on." As evening approached, the team conducted final equipment checks and reviewed their insertion route one more time. Maria paid particular attention to her ammunition, selecting rounds that had been manufactured from the same lot and stored under identical conditions. At extreme range, even tiny variations in bullet weight or powder charge could affect accuracy. Rodriguez tested his spotting scope and range-finding equipment, ensuring every piece of gear was functioning perfectly. His job would be crucial during the mission, providing wind readings, range corrections, and target identification in challenging conditions. Bradley coordinated with the helicopter pilots who would insert and extract them, confirming timing and emergency procedures. The insertion would be fast and low, designed to avoid detection by any sentries in the area. At 2200 hours, they boarded the Black Hawk helicopter that would take them to their insertion point. The aircraft flew low and fast, following terrain features to avoid radar detection. Maria sat quietly during the flight, mentally rehearsing every aspect of the upcoming shot. The helicopter touched down briefly on a narrow ridge about 3 kilometers from their target. The team offloaded quickly, and within seconds, the aircraft was airborne again, disappearing into the darkness. They moved carefully through the mountain terrain, using night vision equipment to navigate the rocky paths. The weight of their gear made the climb challenging, but they maintained a steady pace toward their destination. 2 hours later, they reached the ridge that would serve as their shooting position. Bradley and Morrison established security while Maria and Rodriguez found the optimal location for the shot. The position was perfect, a natural depression in the rocks that provided concealment while offering a clear view of the target compound below. Maria set up her rifle carefully, ensuring the bipod legs were properly adjusted for the angle of the shot. Rodriguez positioned his spotting scope and immediately began taking initial readings. "Range is 1,186 meters to the center of the target building," he reported quietly. "Temperature is 42 degrees, humidity at 15%. Maria recorded the data in her shooting log, along with altitude and atmospheric pressure readings from her portable weather station. Every variable would affect the bullet's trajectory over such a long distance. As dawn approached, they could see the compound coming to life below them. People began moving around the buildings, going about their morning routines. Maria counted at least 20 individuals in the area, most of them women and children. "Visual on multiple civilians," she reported to Bradley. "Copy that," Bradley replied. "Remember, we wait for positive identification of the target and clear separation from non-combatants." Hours passed slowly. The sun climbed higher and the temperature began to rise. Maria remained motionless behind her rifle, occasionally adjusting her position slightly to maintain circulation. Rodriguez provided regular wind readings, tracking the changing conditions in the valley below. At 1300 hours, activity in the compound increased. Several men emerged from different buildings and began walking toward the main structure where the professor was expected to appear. "Movement in the compound," Rodriguez reported. "Looks like people are gathering for the meeting." Maria watched through her scope as figures moved around the buildings below. The magnification made everything seem closer, but she had to constantly remind herself of the actual distance involved. "There," Rodriguez said suddenly. "Roof of the main building. 3 men just came up." Through her scope, Maria could see 3 figures on the rooftop. 2 appeared to be younger men, probably students or followers. The third was older, with a gray beard and measured movements that suggested authority. "Possible target identification," she reported to Bradley. "Hold on confirmation," Bradley replied. "Intelligence says he has a distinctive scar on his left cheek. Can you see facial features at that range?" Maria adjusted her scope's magnification to maximum power. The image became clearer but less stable due to heat waves rising from the valley floor. She could make out general facial features, but fine details were difficult to discern. "Negative on facial features," she reported. "Too much thermal distortion." They waited, hoping for better viewing conditions or a clearer identification opportunity. The 3 men on the rooftop appeared to be in deep discussion, occasionally pointing toward different areas of the surrounding mountains. "Wind's picking up," Rodriguez observed, studying his instruments. "Gusting to 15 miles per hour from the southwest." Maria made mental notes of the wind conditions. At this range, wind would have a significant effect on bullet trajectory. She'd need to time the shot for a period of relatively calm air. "There," Rodriguez said excitedly but quietly. "Target turned his head. I can see the scar on his left cheek. That's definitely our guy." Maria confirmed the identification through her own scope. The professor was standing near the edge of the rooftop, gesturing as he spoke to his students. He was clearly the leader of the group. "Positive target identification," she reported to Bradley. "Roger that. You are cleared to engage when ready." Maria settled into her shooting position, focusing on her breathing and heart rate. The target was stationary for the moment, but that could change at any time. She needed to be ready to take the shot immediately when conditions were optimal. She placed her crosshairs on the target's center mass, adjusting for the estimated wind speed and direction. At this range, she was aiming several feet to the left and above the actual target to compensate for bullet drop and wind drift. "Wind's calming down," Rodriguez whispered. 6 to 8 miles per hour, steady from the southwest." Maria made a final adjustment to her aim point and began her shooting sequence. Deep breath in, let half out, begin trigger squeeze. The target suddenly moved, walking toward the other side of the rooftop. Maria relaxed her trigger finger and tracked the target with her scope. He was now standing closer to his students, making the shot more difficult due to the proximity of other people. "Stand by," she whispered. They waited again. Morrison shifted slightly behind them, but didn't speak. He understood that at this critical moment, any distraction could affect the shot. The target separated from the students again, moving back toward the edge of the rooftop. Maria reacquired her sight picture and prepared to fire. This time, she completed the trigger squeeze. The rifle fired with the familiar crack, and Maria immediately began tracking the bullet's path through her scope. At this range, it would take over a second for the bullet to reach the target. She watched the professor continue his conversation, unaware that death was traveling toward him at over 2,500 feet per second. Then he collapsed. The students on the rooftop looked around in confusion before realizing what had happened. One of them knelt beside the fallen professor while the other scanned the surrounding hills, trying to determine where the shot had come from. "Target down," Maria reported quietly. "Clean hit." Rodriguez confirmed through his spotting scope. "Definite hit. Target is not moving." Below them, the compound erupted in activity as people ran for cover or tried to help the wounded man. Within minutes, vehicles began arriving, and armed men started searching the area around the buildings. "Time to go," Bradley said, already beginning to pack his gear. The team quickly gathered their equipment and began moving away from the shooting position. In the distance, they could hear vehicles starting up as search parties prepared to comb the hills for the sniper team. As they descended from the ridge, Rodriguez caught up with Maria. "How do you do that?" he asked. "Make shots like that look so easy?" Maria considered the question as she navigated down a steep section of trail. "It's not easy," she said finally. "But when you've trained for something your entire career, when you understand your equipment completely, and when you respect the responsibility that comes with pulling the trigger, the shot itself becomes just the final step in a long process." "The professor was a bad guy," Rodriguez said, "but it still means something, taking a life from that distance." "It means everything," Maria agreed. "That's why we train so hard. That's why we only take shots we're certain of. Every round we fire has consequences." Behind them, Morrison was monitoring their radio for any signs that enemy forces had picked up their trail. So far, the extraction route remained clear. They reached their pickup point 2 hours later, just as the sun was beginning to set. The Black Hawk helicopter appeared exactly on schedule, touching down briefly to collect the team before disappearing back into the darkening sky. During the flight back to base, Bradley spoke into his headset, reporting mission success to their commanders. Another high-value target had been eliminated, and another threat to American forces had been removed. Maria sat quietly during the return flight, already thinking about equipment maintenance and mission debriefing procedures. The successful shot was satisfying, but it was just one mission among many. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new targets, and new opportunities to demonstrate her capabilities. As they approached Chapman, Morrison leaned over and spoke into her ear over the noise of the helicopter engines. "Outstanding shooting today, Santos. That's the kind of precision that saves lives." "Thank you," Maria replied, appreciating the acknowledgement from someone whose respect had been so hard to earn. Rodriguez grinned and gave her a thumbs up from across the aircraft cabin. Even Bradley seemed more relaxed now that the mission was complete and his team was safely extracted. But Maria knew that success bred higher expectations. Each accomplished mission led to more challenging assignments. Command would continue pushing her limits, testing her abilities in increasingly difficult scenarios. She was ready for whatever came next. The emergency briefing came at 300 hours, 6 days after the successful elimination of the professor. Maria was pulled from deep sleep by Rodriguez, shaking her shoulder urgently. "Santos, get up! Bradley wants everyone in the briefing room now. Something big is happening." Maria was dressed and moving within 2 minutes. In the special operations community, middle-of-the-night emergency calls usually meant Americans were in immediate danger somewhere. The briefing room was brightly lit despite the early hour. Bradley stood at the front with several officers Maria didn't recognize, probably intelligence personnel from higher headquarters. Morrison was already there, looking grim as he studied a series of photographs spread across the table. "Sit down," Bradley said without preamble. "We have an evolving situation that requires immediate response." One of the intelligence officers stepped forward. At 0130 hours, a convoy carrying American medical personnel was ambushed about 60 kilometers from here. 3 soldiers were killed in the initial attack, but 5 others were taken hostage. Maria felt her stomach tighten. Hostage situations were among the most challenging scenarios for any military unit, requiring precision, timing, and split-second decision-making. "The hostages are being held in a compound in the mountains," the officer continued. 2 doctors, 2 medics, and 1 convoy security guard, all American personnel. Bradley pointed to aerial photographs showing a cluster of buildings surrounded by high walls. "Intelligence indicates the hostages are being held in the main building here. The kidnappers are demanding the release of captured Taliban leaders in exchange for the Americans." "What's the timeline?" Morrison asked. "The kidnappers have given us 12 hours to respond to their demands. After that, they've threatened to begin executing hostages." Maria studied the photographs carefully. The compound was in a valley surrounded by steep ridges, making approach difficult. The buildings appeared to be traditional Afghan construction, thick walls and flat rooftops. "What are our options?" she asked. Another intelligence officer answered. "Direct assault is problematic. The compound is heavily defended, and the hostages would likely be killed before we could reach them. Airstrike isn't possible due to the risk to American personnel." Bradley looked directly at his team. "That leaves precision sniper fire to eliminate the guards simultaneously, followed by a rapid assault to extract the hostages." Rodriguez was studying the aerial photos intently. "How many guards are we talking about?" "Current intelligence indicates 5 enemy fighters, 3 outside the building where the hostages are held, 2 more positioned on rooftops for overwatch." Maria immediately understood the complexity of the situation. 5 targets that would need to be eliminated simultaneously to prevent any of them from harming the hostages. This wasn't a single precision shot. This was synchronized precision shooting requiring multiple snipers working in perfect coordination. "What other sniper teams are available?" Morrison asked. "None," Bradley replied flatly. "Every other sniper team in the region is already committed to ongoing operations. We're the only asset available for this mission." The room fell silent as the implications became clear. 5 targets, 1 sniper team. In conventional tactics, that would be impossible. Even the best sniper couldn't engage 5 separate targets quickly enough to prevent retaliation against the hostages. "There might be a way," Maria said quietly, causing everyone in the room to look at her. "Go on," Bradley encouraged. Maria pointed to the aerial photographs, tracing lines of sight from the surrounding ridges to the compound. "If we position ourselves on this ridge here, we have overlapping fields of fire to all 5 target locations. The key would be timing and target assignment. You're talking about rapid engagement of multiple targets," one of the intelligence officers said skeptically. "Even with perfect accuracy, the time between shots would give the remaining guards opportunity to harm the hostages." "Not if we do it right," Maria continued, her mind working through the tactical problem. "Rodriguez and I engage the 3 guards around the main building simultaneously. I take 2, he takes 1. Morrison engages the rooftop sentries from a secondary position. All shots fired within a 3-second window." Morrison studied the photographs with new interest. "Rodriguez isn't a sniper, he's a spotter. But he's a qualified marksman," Maria pointed out. "At these ranges, with proper setup and coordination, it's feasible." Rodriguez looked uncertain. "Maria, I appreciate the confidence, but I'm not sure I'm ready for that level of responsibility." Maria turned to face him directly. "Danny, you've been watching me shoot for months. You know ballistics, windage, and range estimation better than most snipers. You have the skills. You just need to trust them." Bradley was quiet for a moment, considering the proposal. Finally, he spoke. "It's risky. If any one of the shots fails, the entire mission fails, and hostages die." "If we don't try something, hostages die anyway," Maria replied. "This gives us a chance." One of the intelligence officers checked his watch. "You have 8 hours before the deadline. How long do you need to get into position?" 4 hours for infiltration and setup," Bradley answered. "That gives us a 4-hour window to execute." The decision was made. While other personnel coordinated with the assault team that would extract the hostages after the guards were eliminated, Bradley's team began immediate mission planning. Maria worked closely with Rodriguez, walking him through the ballistics calculations and shooting techniques he'd need for his part of the mission. They dry-fired their weapons repeatedly, practicing the timing and coordination required for simultaneous engagement. "Remember," Maria told him, "your breathing, trigger squeeze, and follow-through need to be exactly like we've practiced. At the moment I say execute, you have 3 seconds to take your shot." Morrison would be positioned 50 meters away, engaging the rooftop sentries with his own rifle. The timing had to be perfect, all 5 shots within seconds of each other. "What if I miss?" Rodriguez asked quietly. "You won't miss," Maria said with certainty. "You're better prepared than you realize." At 600 hours, they inserted by helicopter to a ridge overlooking the target compound. The approach was treacherous in the pre-dawn darkness, requiring careful movement over loose rock and steep terrain. They reached their shooting positions just as the sun began to rise. Maria and Rodriguez set up side by side, while Morrison positioned himself at the secondary location with a clear view of the rooftops. Through her scope, Maria could see the compound coming to life below them. Armed men moved around the buildings, and she began identifying the specific targets they would need to eliminate. "Range to the main building is 650 meters, Rodriguez reported, his voice steadier than she'd expected. Maria confirmed the range with her own equipment and began calculating environmental factors. The morning air was calm, which would help with accuracy, but the sun angle would create shadows that could affect target identification. "I see 5 guards, Morrison reported from his position. 3 around the main building, 2 on rooftops as expected." Maria studied each target through her scope, memorizing their positions and movement patterns. The guards around the main building appeared relaxed, unaware that they were being observed from the ridge above. "Target assignments," Maria said into her radio. "Rodriguez, you have the guard at the southeast corner of the main building. Morrison, you have both rooftop sentries. I'll take the 2 guards near the main entrance." Each team member confirmed their target assignments and settled into their shooting positions. Now they had to wait for the optimal moment when all 5 targets were clearly visible and positioned for clean shots. Hours passed slowly. The guards moved around the compound, sometimes disappearing into buildings or behind walls. Maria tracked their patterns, looking for a moment when all 5 would be exposed simultaneously. At 1100 hours, she saw her opportunity. "All targets are visible," she announced quietly. "Rodriguez, confirm you have your target." "Confirmed," Rodriguez replied, his voice focused and professional. "Morrison, status on rooftop targets?" "Both targets visible and stationary," Morrison reported. Maria took a deep breath and began her final preparations. This was the moment when months of training and mission experience would determine the fate of 5 American hostages. "On my mark," she said into her radio. 3, 2, 1, execute." Maria's first shot took the guard nearest the main entrance center mass. Without pausing to observe the results, she immediately shifted to her second target and fired again. Both guards dropped instantly. Rodriguez's shot echoed a fraction of a second later. Through her peripheral vision, Maria saw his target fall near the corner of the building. Morrison's rifle cracked twice in rapid succession from his position, and both rooftop sentries collapsed. "All targets down," Maria reported, immediately scanning the compound for any additional threats. The courtyard of the compound was suddenly still. 5 armed guards lay motionless where they had fallen, eliminated in less than 5 seconds of coordinated shooting. "Assault team, you are clear to advance," Bradley radioed to the ground forces moving toward the compound. Within minutes, the assault team had breached the main building and located the hostages. All 5 Americans were alive and unharmed, though shaken by their ordeal. "Hostages secure," came the radio call. "All personnel accounted for." Maria felt a wave of relief wash over her. They had succeeded. The impossible coordination of multiple precision shots had worked exactly as planned. Rodriguez was staring through his spotting scope at his target, his face pale but determined. "I can't believe I actually did that," he said quietly. "I can," Maria replied. "You did exactly what you were trained to do." Morrison's voice crackled over the radio from his position. "Outstanding shooting, both of you. That was textbook precision." As they packed their gear and prepared to move to the extraction point, Bradley approached Maria with an expression of genuine admiration. "Santos, that was exceptional tactical thinking and even better execution. You turned an impossible situation into a successful rescue." "It was a team effort," Maria replied. "Rodriguez made his shot when it counted, and Morrison's rooftop work was perfect." "Yes, but you were the one who saw the solution when everyone else saw an impossible problem," Bradley continued. "That kind of tactical thinking is what separates good snipers from exceptional ones." During the helicopter flight back to base, the team was quieter than usual. The successful rescue of 5 American hostages was satisfying, but they all understood how close the mission had come to failure. Rodriguez sat across from Maria, occasionally shaking his head in amazement. "I keep thinking about what would have happened if I'd missed that shot." "But you didn't miss," Maria pointed out. "When it mattered most, when American lives depended on it, you performed exactly as trained." Morrison leaned forward to join the conversation. "Santos, I owe you an apology. When you first joined this team, I questioned whether you belonged here. Today proved that you don't just belong. You're probably the best tactical thinker we have." Maria appreciated the recognition, but she was already thinking about the lessons learned from the mission. The coordinated shooting technique could be refined and improved for future use. There were always ways to get better. "We all performed well today," she said. "That's what teams do. They make each other better." Back at base, the mission debriefing was attended by officers from throughout the regional command. The successful rescue using coordinated precision shooting was being studied as a new tactical technique that could be applied in similar situations. During the debrief, Rodriguez was commended for his shooting performance and recommended for sniper training. Morrison volunteered to be his instructor, recognizing the potential he demonstrated under pressure. The key to today's success, Bradley explained to the assembled officers, was having personnel who could think beyond conventional tactics and adapt to an unprecedented situation. After the formal debrief concluded, the team gathered in their usual workspace to clean equipment and complete paperwork. The atmosphere was relaxed in a way it hadn't been when Maria first joined the unit. Morrison approached her as she worked on her rifle maintenance. "Santos, I've been thinking about what makes a good sniper team. It's not just about individual shooting ability. It's about trust, communication, and the willingness to push each other to be better." "I agree," Maria replied. "The best teams are the ones where everyone contributes their strengths." "You've made us all better snipers," Morrison continued. "Your attention to detail, your tactical thinking, even your obsessive equipment maintenance. It's raised the standard for all of us." Rodriguez looked up from his own weapon cleaning. "So what's next for us?" Bradley overheard the question and answered from across the room. "Command is putting together a specialized hostage rescue capability based on what we accomplished today. They want our team to develop the tactics and train other units." Maria smiled as she reassembled her rifle. The weapon that had seemed like a burden to prove herself worthy of carrying had become the tool through which she'd earned the complete respect of her peers. More importantly, it had become the means through which she could save American lives. The nickname Robot had evolved, too. Where once it suggested she was trying too hard to fit in, now it represented her reputation for precise, emotionless execution under pressure. It wasn't a criticism anymore. It was a compliment. As evening fell over Forward Operating Base Chapman, Maria Santos sat with her teammates, planning future missions and refining their techniques. She'd started as the outsider who had to prove herself with every shot. Now she was simply a valued member of one of the military's most elite teams. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new targets, and new opportunities to demonstrate that skill, dedication, and careful preparation could overcome any obstacle. For now, though, 5 American hostages were safe, and her team was stronger than ever. The job was far from over, but for the first time since joining the unit, Maria felt like she was exactly where she belonged. Not because she was a woman who had proven herself, but because she was a professional who had earned her place through competence, courage, and an unwavering commitment to excellence. In the world of special operations, respect was earned one shot at a time. Maria Santos had fired enough perfect shots to last a lifetime.